Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpati Kopisha Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostuti Tapta Kanjana Gaurani Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanjakalpatarubhyascha Kirupastintu Vaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everybody. We have with us Shyamananad Krishna Das BG, all the way from South Africa, to be here amongst us. We know Prabhuji comes every Sunday, so I will not spend time on introduction. We are Prabhuji, on behalf of everybody, please accept our humble obeisances. We are reading the Bhagavad Gita as it is. We are on chapter 6. Chapter 6 is called Dhyana Yoga, and we are on text 26 today. Prabhuji, I'm handing over to you.
Okay, Kirtika, thank you very much. Hare Krishna, everyone. So nice to at least have your acquaintance, even though I can't see you, but to have your acquaintance in, what do they call that, virtually. Actually, we were just in a meeting earlier where the host was saying, okay, I want you all to turn your cameras on so I can see you at least briefly. Why are you hiding from me? So just briefly turn on your cameras so I can see you. Is that all right?
Then you can switch them back.
Then you can switch off. I just want to see you, you know. Hi, Krishna Mataji. Hi, Krishna, Hemendra. I hope you're as wonderful as he is.
Hare Krishna. I'm just going to get to the I'll do it in a minute. I can't get through yet.
Okay, no problem. Hi, Krishna Premela. Nice to see you. It's nice to see you I'm talking to now. Okay, now I've seen your beautiful faces. You can turn your cameras off.
I can't find my camera.
Hi, Krishna Vivek. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for showing your face to me. You can turn your cameras off now. I've seen you. At least I've got some idea in my mind who I'm talking to. Okay. So we are studying from 6th chapter. 6th chapter is Dhyana Yoga. Dhyana Yoga is meditation. And this specifically is coming in the context of Ashtanga Yoga. So there's contrast, actually. There's a big contrast between Ashtanga Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, because Ashtanga Yoga is a stepwise process. I've been looking at that for some time, actually. From the verses 10 up to 32, we are looking at that process in some detail. In the 5th chapter, at the end, almost at the end, 2 verses before the end, Krishna briefly explained the Ashtanga Yoga system in just 2 verses by explaining that one can come to the platform of self-realization through the practice of fruitless work. In other words, to work as one is duty bound, but not to enjoy and try to enjoy the fruit. One can come to the liberated platform through that process. And also, Krishna says, you can come through Ashtanga Yoga. So 2-verse summary is given there. And now we're studying 6th chapter, which is explaining the whole thing in detail. So I just want to look back at the verses we've covered so that when we study this verse, we can pick up the context, because the context is very important. Actually, if we study the verse on its own, we tend to lose the context, because when we're studying Bhagavad Gita like this, actually, it's nice to maintain a picture of what we've looked at previously and how this verse that we're studying today fits into the whole picture. So we can step back a little bit And we can say, well, we are studying first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, which is mostly to do with karma, actually. It's most to do with our activity, because our activity can be binding or liberating, depending on the consciousness we perform it in. So that's a very important principle. Now, within these 6 chapters, we are looking at, especially from 3rd chapter, 10th verse, up to the end of this chapter, we are looking at yoga ladder. Because in the practice of spiritual life, actually one can get stuck. One can practice a yoga process, but get stuck at a different level. And those different levels are like rungs on a ladder. So a ladder is for transferring you from one platform to another, or from one level to a higher level. And here in this yoga ladder, we're studying actually from the very basic understanding, which is at least that one should be a human being and live a regulated life. But at the same time, one can get one's desires fulfilled. So that's called karma kanda. That's what Krishna explained in the 3rd chapter, verses 10 to 16, the process of sacrifice. To get done the things you want to get done, to get you a sense gratification, but to do it in a religious way. Then Krishna moves on from that point to something called Sakam Karma Yoga. Because if one follows the Veda, then one gets purified, one begins to understand there's an authority structure within the universe, and then one begins to accept that there are demigods, and the demigods actually have to be properly dealt with so that I'm paying my taxes. So then one performs that process basically culturally. One does the things one should do out of duty, and gradually one gets purified to the point where he comes to the platform of liberated understanding. In other words, that one understands that I'm Brahman, I'm spirit soul, and everything is spirit actually. So that is the liberated platform, at least at the initial level. And then from there, one develops a desire to turn inward and meditate, actually, because one loses one's connection with the external world. That is how a yogi is situated like that. When we are not yogis, we get our satisfaction by connecting with the outside world, specifically by performing sense gratification, connecting the senses where they're objects. But a yogi who has practiced dutiful work comes to the platform of realizing the self, that I am pure spirit soul. That is called the Brahman platform, to realize that I am Brahman and everything is Brahman, actually. Then one comes to that platform, one no longer looks externally to get the sense gratification, but rather one turns internal in order to develop and meditate on understanding that I am pure Brahman. So that is what we're studying in this 6th chapter. In the beginning, actually, verses in the first few verses, Krishna is explaining that if you want to practice this yoga system, the first thing you have to do is work to become purified. Because if we try to meditate before we're pure, we'll simply think of sense gratification. So therefore, Krishna says, one is neophyte in this yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one is advanced, cessation of material activity is said to be the means. So we are studying now these verses from 10 up to 32, we're at 26 today, is a description of this yoga system in detail. Dhyana yoga, the yoga of meditation. It is a stepwise process. It is mechanical. Actually, when we study this, we can thank our lucky stars that we don't have to do it. What we do, we don't have to walk up that ladder, actually, with all the different rungs. 400 lifetimes at Karma Kanda in this level, another 60 lifetimes doing that, then another 120 doing something else. Then you come to the platform of yoga, proper karma yoga, engaging your activities in order to make spiritual advancement in connection with Krishna. And then when you become purified, you turn inward and you meditate. And gradually then you realize the super soul. And when you come to the super soul, then you realize super soul is a person, and such an incredible person that you should surrender to that super soul. So this is the yoga ladder. But as devotees, we don't need to do that. We simply get in the lift and we press the button. And we perform bhakti yoga directly. So we don't have to do these steps. But Krishna is including them in the discussion in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is bringing everyone in. Yogis get stuck at different levels. But the goal is actually bhakti yoga. That is the final goal. So we're studying in this instance here, we're studying the mechanics of this. It's a bona fide process, actually. If you appear in the age known as Satya, this is the bona fide process for spiritual advancement. But in this age, everyone's minds are very disturbed, actually. So no one can perform this practice. You can perform it, but there won't really be much benefit because we haven't got a steady mind. And this yoga practice is all about steady mind. It's all about learning to focus the mind. Actually, we'll see a little later, this verse we're going to study is the platform of pratyahara, to withdraw the senses from, the mind from sense engagement, to gradually, step by step, withdraw the mind from sense engagement. So we're going to study on that a little, but I want to look back at these verses now, beginning with 10. The 10th verse is basic practices of yoga. If you like, why don't we go through these verses? If you've got your Bhagavad Gita, we can just quickly skim through verses and get a picture of how this Ashtanga yoga is developing. Because Ashtanga yoga means 8 limbs. Anga means, like we say, mridanga. Mridanga means a clay limb. Because the mridanga player considers the mridanga part of his body, actually. It's like a clay limb. And you see the mridanga players are like that. They're taking their prasadam and they're playing mridanga on the table. It's like an extension of their body. So it's a limb. So mridanga means a clay limb of the mridanga player's body. Similarly, this Ashtanga yoga, anga means limb, part or a section or a limb. And ashta means 8. So this yoga system is 8 limbs. They are yama, niyama, asana, pratyahara, pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. These are the 8 limbs. So it's a stepwise process. First of all, there is external purity, yama. Certain things you must follow. Like the first one on the list is actually non-violence. Not only to be a vegetarian, but not to commit acts which agitate others, which damage others. And then it goes on, then internal purity. Then you have to learn to sit, because this yoga practice takes a long time. To learn to control the body, learn to sit. That is what's being propagated in the West as Hatha yoga. It is one section of this Ashtanga yoga. Then you have to learn to control the breath, because this yoga system is all about mind control. So in order to control the mind, you have to first control your breath, because the two are closely linked. So pranayam, learning to drill the breath. And when you're expert, you stop breathing, actually. When you stop breathing, then the mind is very placid and still. Then what you have to do is you have to extract the mind from sense objects, withdraw the mind from sense engagement like that. So that's what this verse is all about, we're going to study today. So, and then when you're expert at that, then dhyana, learning to focus the mind. Dharana, learning to focus the mind. And then you actually get to dhyana, which is the meditation process. What do you meditate on? On the supersoul. And then one becomes fixed, and then nothing can deviate. So that's perfection, samadhi. So this is the yoga system. And just by looking at the 8 limbs, we can understand it stepwise, little by little by little by little. And even Krishna says that in this discussion. So first is the basic practices. Then that is the 10th verse. How to engage in this practice. Basic things that one must learn to do. Then Krishna in 11 and 12 is saying where to sit, because where you set up shop to do this meditation is important. Shouldn't be too high, too low, should be in a sacred place. Then, you've got to spread your kusha grass and your deerskin and your soft cloth and sit on it firmly. Then how to sit in meditation. When you've got your things set up, and you've got to sit in a certain way, because we need the life hairs aligned. So therefore your body's got to be neck, back, neck and head erect in a straight line. Then you've got to sit in half lotus at least, because then the body is arranged nicely for meditation. Then you've got to stare at the tip of the nose, because if we don't focus on something, actually then our mind is going to drift. We're going to discuss that in a minute when we come to the 26th verse. You've got to focus on something. So the tip of the nose. Why? Because that's where the breath control comes in. And then eyes half open. Because if you close your eyes, you could fall asleep. And if you open your eyes, you get distracted. So eyes half closed, staring at the tip of the nose. And if you get all that together and you practice that, then you actually get that result. You can focus and you can cease material activities. So that is the 15th verse. 15th verse, by practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist is mind regulated, attains the kingdom of God by cessation of material existence, by stopping connection with the material world completely. Then there are more practices of yoga. If we go on to 16 and 17, that the things that, to become expert, that one to get the basic practices together, and you have to be very moderate in your habits of work, recreation, eating and sleeping. Because too much on one side, too much austerity hardens the heart. You can't practice. Too little, you won't be able to practice. Your mind will be agitated. So more practices of yoga. Then we come to fixing the mind. That's 18 and 19. The yogi, by practicing disciplines his mental activities, becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires. And we discussed that previously. But not only do you have to give up the sense engagement, you have to give up the desire for sense engagement. They're two separate things, actually. That you can externally give up the connection by performing sense gratificatory activities, but in your mind, you may be meditating on them. So they both have to be given up. Even the desire to enjoy materially has to be given up, because that's a subtle thing that you can actually enjoy within your mind, imagining that you are tasting the sense objects. You can do that actually. It's a more subtle form of sense gratification. So that has to be given up as well. So this is Yoga Rudra. And then we come to how the yoga, when you get all that together from the 20th verse, then Krishna is describing when you get to that state, cessation of material activity, then how do you feel? So that's described in 20 to 23. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities. Note Krishna puts it in that way. Not only that we stop the sense gratification, but even mentally within the mind, that has been stopped as well. The perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self, who we really are. You actually get the understanding then by realization. I am pure Brahman, actually. Nothing to do with this material body, and so on and so forth. You get the idea, no? Then we come to obtaining the perfectional stage through controlling the mind. That's what you've studied last few days, these two verses, 24 and 25. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not be deviated, because it requires that actually. It takes time, you must be very determined. You must push out all these desires to engage with the material nature, which is what we've been doing for countless births. One should abandon without exception, Krishna is saying. Nothing left over, not even one desire must be left over. Without exception, all material desires born of mental speculation. You may remember that from the second chapter, when Arjuna asked, what is the characteristic of a transcendental? Krishna answered, and he said, it is someone who's given up sense gratification based on mental concoction. Because what we're enjoying in this so-called enjoyment in this world is based on mental concoction. It doesn't really have any existence. But due to our mental concoctions, we think it does. It's the same thing here. Without exception, all material desires born of mental speculation, and thus control the senses on all sides by the mind. This chapter is all about mind control, because the senses come to the mind. They all come into the mind. So if we can control the mind, we can control the senses, because that's where the information comes to the mind. Then the verse you studied yesterday or the day before, I'm not sure, gradually, step by step. This is what I was saying. This is a stepwise process. You can see from yama to pratyahara, which is what we're studying, is a long way, actually. It's a long way. It takes many, many steps to come to that. And even now, Krishna is telling us it's step by step. Gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence. Krishna talks about that in the end of the third chapter, when he says, we should break our connection with lusty desires. How? By regulating the senses and by deliberate spiritual intelligence. We must know, because the intelligence is a device for discriminating and remembering from our past experience, so that we know what to do and what not to do. So the intelligence is required to direct the mind. This is how it works. Gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance only on the self. This is what we're talking about in the initial stage, that one actually is meditating on the self. And this is why in the next verse that we're going to study today, Krishna says, bring it back under the control of the self, because that is where we're at. We're not at full supersoul realization yet. We're just on the Brahma Bhuta platform where we understand we're pure Brahman. So this is stepwise. One should become situated in trance by means of intelligence, sustained by full conviction, because you need that conviction. You need to be solid. You need determination that if I follow this path, which has been given in the scripture, and I perform all the steps properly, I will come to this stage. And we showed the picture many times, no? Maybe I'll just show you again. Just see if it really brings it home to you. You get the idea of what I'm talking about here. Here is the picture. You can see by the state of the yogi, the fingernails are long, the hair is long, the body is emaciated. So what does it immediately suggest to us? It takes a long time. Stepwise takes a long time. This is why nobody in this age can perform it. Our minds are too disturbed. It's not possible, actually. There are too many things which are bothering us. Gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence, sustained with full conviction. Very important thing. And thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone, because that's the initial stage. I am pure Brahman. I'm spiritual, actually. I'm nothing to do with this material nature. So that is the initial fixity. It is called the Brahman platform. In that state, one comes into contact with a feeling called Brahmananda, where one understands that I am pure spirit soul. All this bodily thing, I don't need that actually anymore. I don't need that because I'm nothing to do with this body. It's just some covering, which doesn't really belong to me. It was given to me because I had an erroneous mentality. So that state is there when we get this fixity. Should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. Because if we think of something else, we're going to get deviated. So now I think this background is necessary so we can see where we're at in this description, at least to get a sense of what's gone before. So this verse then really comes into context. If you want an analysis, we're studying here the step known as pratyahara. Pratyahara means to withdraw the mind from sense objects. Because if we're going to focus the mind and meditate with it, first we have to withdraw it from sense object. And this is the commonality in our path, actually. Because in our path, we also have to learn to control the mind. And how do you know that? As soon as you pick up your japamala, you know that. Another way you know that is if the electricity is not working that morning and you have to have a cold shower. When you turn the tap on to get into the cold shower, you immediately know what the mind is. Because the mind will tell you, no way, Jose. So this is also important for devotees. Mind control is also very important. So we have to learn from this, actually, about mind control. But our mind control is by giving it over to Krishna, actually, not this stepwise process. We're going to come to that in a minute. Okay, so with this background, we're going to study this verse a little bit, actually. Purport is really nice, actually. It's a short purport, but it's really nice. Okay, so this is the verse. We do, I say, you say.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. Yato yato nischalati.
Yato yato nischalati.
Manas chanchalam ashtiram.
Manas
Sanchala astiram
Tatas tato niyamayat. Sorry, excuse me. Actually, I slipped up on my presentation, on my pronunciation. I'll do it again. Tatas tato niyamayat.
Tatastato niramyat
Atmaneva vasham nayat.
Atmaneva vashamnayet.
Now, as we do the word for word, actually, you can watch out because Krishna here is going to tell us in 3 words how difficult the mind control is. I'll point them out as we come to them. So, yata, yata,
Yata yata.
wherever,
Wherever.
because wherever can mean anything. And you know that because your mind will go wherever it wants. And trust me, that's a lot of places, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mind goes a lot of places. So wherever.
Wherever.
Yeah. Nishchalati
Nishalati
becomes very agitated.
becomes verily agitated.
So who knows about that? Does your mind become very agitated sometimes?
Yes.
So we all know that. So this is the first word that Krishna is using to explain the nature of the mind. Then to the word which is the mind, manaha,
Manaha.
the mind.
The mind.
The word mantra from manaha. Manaha and Triyate. We put those two words together and with that which is used to deliver the mind. So Manaha means the mind. Then we come to Chanchalam,
Chanchalam,
flickering.
flickering.
So have you noticed that about your mind? It's very flickering. It wants to go here, and then it wants to go somewhere else. And then it wants to go somewhere else again. And it wants to come back to the first place it went to. Which is the second word that Krishna is using to describe the nature of the mind. We had Nischalati, and now we've got Chanchalam. And now we come to the third one. Ashtiram,
Ashtiram,
unsteady.
unsteady.
Now, you know when you've got an unsteady mind, the moment that ekadasi comes round, because, you know, some days we may be very busy, we miss breakfast. The mind doesn't really bother us. But as soon as it comes to ekadasi and we tell the mind, look, you know, we're going to fast today, the mind immediately becomes agitated and unsteady. No, I want breakfast. On any of the day, we're not bothered, you know. When it comes to ekadasi, then we know our mind is unsteady. So this is the third word. So Krishna here is describing the mind is nischalati, the mind is chanchalam, and the mind is ashtiram, unsteady, flickering, and agitated, the nature of the mind. Okay. Tata, tata. From there.
From there.
That means wherever the mind went. From there. Because once have you noticed how quickly the mind can go? You're sitting in your front room. It's like we spent some time in New York filming a Baicharam with our spiritual master. So I can see my front room now, which is South Africa. I can close my eyes and I can think of New York and immediately I'm there. Now that's a distance of about, maybe 12 or 13,000 kilometers. Just see how quickly the mind can go there, where the mind went. Niyamya. Regulating. Etat. This. Atmani. In the self. Eva. Certainly. Vasham. Control. Nayet. Must bring under. And now those three things that we learned about the mind come up because Prabhupada collects these word for word meanings together and gives the following translation. From wherever the mind wanders, due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Please repeat. From wherever the mind wanders.
From wherever the mind wanders.
Due to its flickering and unsteady nature.
Due to its flickering and unsteady nature.
One must certainly withdraw it.
One must certainly withdraw it.
And bring it back under the control of the self.
And bring it back under the control of the self.
The use of the word back is very interesting because that means it's where it's supposed to be. And when it goes, just bring it back to where it's supposed to be. You know, this is the nature of the mind. It's very tricky, actually. If you listen to your mind, it'll run you into a ditch, actually, because the mind is a tool for accepting and rejecting. Okay, we'll get into this. I'll read the purport, and then we'll talk about the nature of the mind, and specifically how it relates to us as devotees. Because for this kind of yogi, it's extremely important, the control of the mind, actually. Actually, technically speaking, for any kind of yogi, the control of the mind is very important. There's no question of yoga without control of the mind. Even bhakti yoga, there is no question. One has to learn to control the mind. Because if one can't control the mind, there's no possibility of spiritual progress, actually. One must learn to control. Okay, we're going to read the purport. You follow along with me. The nature of the mind is flickering, unsteady. If we haven't understood from Krishna's statement, Srila Prabhupada is repeating, even though we may not quite have got it. Because it's said that if you want people to understand things, you have to repeat it 3 times. So Prabhupada is repeating so we get the message. But a self-realized yogi has to control the mind. The mind should not control him. Actually, if you watch most people, that's what's going on. They are under the control of their mind. That is called Godas. The other one, to be in control of your mind, is called Goswami or Swami, Goswami. Go means senses. And Swami means the controller, the Lord of the senses. But most of us are actually Godas. We're the servant. Our senses say, I want to do this. And we say, yes, let's go. That is the nature that we face. So one who controls the mind and therefore the senses as well. Control the mind means control of the senses, because as I explained, all the senses come to the mind. That is where they're coming. That is the focal point. And therefore sometimes, like later in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that the yogi is struggling with the 6 senses, which include mind, because that is where all the senses are coming first, to the mind before anything else. So if you can control your mind, automatically control the other senses. So that's what Prabhupada's pointing out here. It's called Goswami or Swami. Swami means Lord. Goswami means the Lord of the senses. In other words, the senses don't dictate to you. You dictate to them. No, I'm going to be like a tortoise. That sense gratification, I'll withdraw that sense from that. But rather my senses will be used transcendentally. We're going to come to that. And one who is controlled by the mind is called Godas. Like I am Shyamananad Krishna Das, means I'm a servant of everybody, actually. I'm the servant. So we shouldn't be Godas, that our senses say, look at this, touch that, eat this, smell that. Yes, my dear senses, tell me what you want me to do, and I will certainly do it. No, we have to learn to control the senses. Godas. Or the servant of the senses. A Goswami knows the standard of sense happiness. Goswami. What is the standard? Prabhupada here is alluding to something Krishna has already said. What is the sense of sense happiness, which the yogi knows? Can anyone tell me? What is the sense of that material happiness? That is the 3rd chapter, verse 28. If you like, you can turn it up. If you've got your Bhagavad Gita in front of you, you can turn it up. 3:28. You see, Krishna is discussing work there in the 3rd chapter. And the 28th verse comes in the discussion. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth. That is the direction we're supposed to be heading. O mighty arm does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification. Why? Knowing well the difference between work in devotion and work in fruitive results. Because the nature of the senses is that they have a beginning, that sense enjoyment has a beginning and an end. So the sage who's steady, who understands what the senses are, he should know the difference between work in devotion and work for fruitive results. And that principle again comes in the 5th chapter, which you can look up. It's 5th chapter, verse 22. You can just look that one up as well. This is also a very interesting verse and is more descriptive of a point we're studying here. 5:22. Yehi Sangsparsajaya Yoga. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery. What are the sources of misery? That is sense gratification. Because the end result of that's the mode of passion, by the way. When you want to engage your senses with the sense objects, it's the mode of passion. In the beginning, it tastes like nectar, but at the end, it tastes like poison. So an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kundi, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so a wise man does not delight. Krishna's already told us about these things. So Prabhupada is reminding us in the purport here. Actually, Goswami knows the standard of sense happiness. So you can tell me then, what is the standard of sense happiness? Someone can tell me?
So it has a beginning and an end?
Yes, has a beginning and an end. So why would you want to do that? You see, our nature is that we are, what is that? Forget the verse now, it won't come to me. Sat. That is our nature. We are spiritual and therefore we are meant to be in spiritual bliss. Anything that's spiritual is by nature blissful. That is a verse from the Vedanta, from the end of all knowledge. Ananda Moibya Sat. So the thing is that sense enjoyment has a beginning and an end. So why would you want to engage in it? So this is what Prabhupada's saying here. A Goswami, one who's controlled his senses, knows the standard of sense happiness has a beginning and end, and therefore I shouldn't indulge in it. In transcendental sense happiness, now we're contrasting, because that is where we're trying to get to. That is our nature. That is what we're supposed to be. So we're trying to get to transcendental sense happiness through renounced work, through performance of Ashtanga Yoga, through Bhakti Yoga. These are the three main systems which Krishna is describing in Bhagavad Gita. But actually, Krishna wants to come to Bhakti Yoga. That is the transcendental sense happiness, actually, enjoyed through transcendental senses. So in transcendental sense happiness, the senses are engaged in the service of Rishikesha. Interesting word. Rishik means the senses, and Isha means the Lord. So Krishna, that is Krishna actually. He's the Lord of all the senses, actually. So in order that we can become actually in transcendental sense happiness, we have to engage our senses in the service of the Lord of the senses. That's a very famous verse, actually. That is Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami has written a book called The Nectar of Devotion, which is basically, you could say it's an activity book for devotees, because our senses require engagement. You can't do nothing. Well, you can try, but it won't get you very far. That was third chapter as well. Krishna said, in the 5th verse, he said, you can't do nothing, not even for the wink of an eye. Akshana, actually. He said, you can't do nothing, because that time is you'll be pushed by your nature to do something. So the senses require engagement. Now, Rupa Goswami, before he gets into this discussion, actually, he talks about some things. Actually, the seed of the discussion is there between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Prayag, and they discussed for 10 days. And in that discussion, actually, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave him the outline of what he wanted him to write about. So this very famous good verse, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevana Bhakti Uchite, comes in that discussion. So that actually the definition of devotional service. So I want to read these verses to you from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because they're very, very important. This is what Prabhupada's saying here. And I'm going to finish the purport, then we'll come to that. In transcendental sense happiness, the senses are engaged in the service of Rishikesha, the Lord of the senses, or the supreme owner of the senses, Krishna. Rishik is the senses, and Isha means the Lord. So that's one name of Krishna. Sometimes Arjuna calls Krishna Rishikesha. You're the Lord of the senses, so why don't you help me control my senses? Like that. No? So serving Krishna with purified senses is called Krishna consciousness. We don't have to go through the stepwise process, but we do have to learn to control our mind and our senses. That is required, but it comes automatically in our process. That is the way of bringing the senses under full control. What is more, see, Prabhupada's going on now. What is more, that is the high yoga practice. The way of bringing the senses under full control, to engage them in the service of Krishna. And that is the highest yoga practice, Krishna. He's hinting at the end of the chapter, actually. Because Krishna, at the end of the chapter, he says that, The one who always engages his mind in thought of me, internally, like that, is surrendered to me, is engaged in devotional service. He's the highest yogi, actually. Always thinking of me internally and surrendered to me, performing devotional service. He's the greatest yogi. And he's actually, and Krishna says, in my opinion, he's the best of all of them. So this is the destination we have. And everyone's going to, all these yogis are going to that destination, but we have the fast track. We have the fast track. So I want to read you these verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Especially, you see at the beginning of the discussion in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is the transcendental activity for devotees, bringing us to the ocean of devotional service. Because an ocean, can you estimate the size of an ocean? Actually, due to the curvature of the earth, you can only see about 20 miles. And then you can't see any further due to the curvature of the earth. So anyone can estimate, let's say you're in the water, you're in the sea like that, miles from anywhere, can you estimate? So the ocean is like that. The ocean of devotional service is like that. It's just this blissful ocean which devotees should reside in. And the way to reside in it is by performance of the different yoga practices, the bhakti yoga limbs, which Rupa Goswami is giving. So at the beginning of the book, he has this discussion. First of all, he gives a definition, which is a very famous verse. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually is speaking that verse. He's discussing with Rupa Goswami at Prayag. He's giving him the outline. So in first-class devotional service, very famous verse, Anyabhilashita shunyam, Jnana kamadinavritam, anukalena krishnanu, shilanam bhakti uttama. This is the definition of pure devotional service. 4 things. When first-class devotional service develops, one must avoid all material desires. Same thing with studying the verse. We were discussing that this whole time. The one has to withdraw his mind from sense gratification. No? Now that way is very difficult to do stepwise and pull the mind out of that kind requires determination, like anything actually, sustained by full conviction. Krishna's experience. For us, it's very easy as devotees because we simply engage our mind in the service of the Lord of the mind, engaging the senses. That is our practice. So one must be devoid of all material desires, knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy, because our devotional service shouldn't be covered by these things, the desire to enjoy, the desire to acquire knowledge or get liberation. And fruitive action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. So this is the definition. This is where we're heading. And this is our devotional practice, actually. Now, there's a couple of other verses which I'm going to read you. And then we come to the one about Rishikesha, Rishikena, which is what Prabhupada is hinting at in this purport. So this is one, if you want to study these verses yourself, it's Madhya Lila, chapter 19, verses 167 to 171. These verses are given there. The purports are very nice if you want to read that. So this is 168. This is going on with the discussion between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Rupa Goswami. He's giving Rupa Goswami the outline of what he wants him to write about. A pure devotee must not cherish any desire than to serve Krishna. Mahaprabhu is repeating himself to drive the point home. He should not offer worship to the demigods or to mundane personalities, which is what human beings have the tendency to do. He should not cultivate artificial knowledge. What does it mean? It means knowledge which isn't really pertaining to Krishna and his devotional service. It's a waste of time, actually, which is devoid of Krishna consciousness. And he should not engage himself in anything other than Krishna conscious activities. One must engage all one's purified senses in the service of the Lord. This is the favorable execution of Krishna conscious activities. Of course, we may not be on this stage yet, but the thing we have to practice little by little. That's our stepwise. We practice these activities to the best of our ability. We chant and japamala. We take Krishna prasadam. We study the scripture. We associate favorably with Krishna's devotees. We execute some devotional service, things which are directly devotional service, and we gradually try to increase. So this is, and then Rupa Goswami is advising us, well, there are certain things you do which are favorable and certain things you should give up because they're not unfavorable. Then we come to 169. These activities are called Shuddha Bhakti. Shuddha means pure. Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotional service. If one renders such pure devotional service, he develops his original love for Krishna in due course of time. In other words, it takes practice. This is what we're doing. We are supposed to be practicing something called sadhana bhakti. Sadhana means to practice. We're not fully fledged yet. We're like ugly duckling. I don't know if you know that story. There once was an ugly duckling with feathers all fluffy and brown, actually. And when he came into town, everyone derided him. But what happened to he wasn't actually a duckling. He actually eventually, because the cygnets are like that, their plumage is brownish. It's kind of mottled brown and white. But eventually the cygnets grow into a swan, very beautiful and majestic bird. So we're kind of like cygnets at the moment. You know, our plumage is kind of a little bit mottled and there's some brown and white and all that. But Prabhupada actually, one time he was asked by one reporter, how many pure devotees do you have? And Prabhupada looked at his secretary and said, how many students do we have? And whatever answer he got, Prabhupada said that many. Because if we practice this process and we stay connected to the process, we will actually become swans one day. We may be cygnets now, but we will become swans if we stick to the practice. So this is the thing, but we have to know where we're heading. So therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving us that definition, pure devotional service. We must know the standard. You need that vision to understand. So then the next verse is very interesting as well. This is the verse that Prabhupada is referring to in the purport when he says, in transcendental sense happiness, the senses are engaged in the service of Rishikesha. So Prabhupada is hinting, here is the verse. Sarvapadeva nimuktam tadparatvaina nimalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchate. Very famous. This is very early on in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is only the 12th verse of the whole work. So the translation goes as follows. Bhakti, or devotional service, means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality Godhead, the master of the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. One is freed from material designations and simply being empowered to the service of the Lord, one's senses are purified. So this is the path we are on. Rishikena, Rishikesha, Sevanam, Bhakti Uchate. It's the definition of devotional service. That the senses should not be engaged in sense gratification. One shouldn't doing that. Knowing well, the sage knows well they have a beginning and an end. And therefore the wise man does not delight in them. 5th chapter, verse 22. No? So Krishna is reminding us, this is the attitude. When also as devotees, we need that attitude. Because we know that, if we engage in sense gratification, we all know that. There's a beginning and an end, and it doesn't satisfy. But even so, we still do it anyway sometimes, even though we know. That is because we're not pure. We need to practice stepwise. Therefore, we need to know Rupa Goswami's ways of engaging in 64 angas of devotional service. We need to know those things. What can I do so that my mind isn't a rascal, isn't engaged? Rather, we engage them in Krishna's service. And automatically, you see, this verse actually is from Narada Pancharatra. It's from Narada's description. Actually, Narada Pancharatra is for the Kali Yuga. It is specially designed processes for devotees, for the difficult age of Kali Yuga, actually, Narada Pancharatra. It is like shortcuts, so that we can get the benefit of the different yoga processes in a very quick way. So it's quoted 112 in the Bhakti Rasamrita, so 1112. So you can understand it's very early on. So we get these two side effects. One is freed from material designations. I'm a man, I'm English. You can't see her, but sitting next to me is my wife. I belong in this house. This person upstairs is my mother-in-law. These are all temporary designations, actually. They're not real. In the next life, it will be different. So we get freed from those material designations, and one's senses get purified. Means that they less and less. Why do you want to engage them in pleasures which have a beginning and an end? When you can engage them in the service of the Lord, and we all know what that's like. When we get that right, when our service is not covered by the desire to enjoy materially, or the desire to acquire knowledge, or yogic siddhis, or to get liberation, when our service is not covered by those things, when we experience the bliss of pure devotional service, which Rupa Goswami says is like an ocean. Ananda Bodhivardhanam, it's like an ocean which is always increasing. So we, as practicing sadhakas, we must learn this process. It's the same thing that Krishna is saying in this verse, actually. From wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature. And when you know that, when you pick up your japamala, then you know that. You know what the mind is like. So we have to learn to control that. Actually, sometimes yada, and sometimes here it's yato, wherever, whenever and wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, we must bring it back. Now, for us, what do we do when we want to bring it back? We tell our mind, it's like Raghunath Das Goswami prays to his mind, actually. He's written a very nice shastra called Manashikshaha. It means instructions to the mind. Because he treats the mind, like he said, the mind is a person. We have to actually preach to it. He tells the mind, my dear mind, why are you being a nonsense? Why don't you just come and listen to this sweet chanting of the holy name? So that's what we have to tell ourselves. And this is where it begins, mind control. It begins when we sit down with our japamala. Wherever the mind wanders due to flickering and unsteady nature, we must certainly bring it back and tell it, my dear mind, please listen to this sweet chanting of the holy name. And that, from this we can develop gradually mind control. So we also have to engage in this. It's not that because we're bhakti yogis, you don't have to engage in mind control. We do. But the thing is, we get Krishna's help Krishna has kindly manifested himself fully in his holy name. Very kindly, you know, after sweet kindness and love for the living entities in this age, he has manifested himself fully. All his energies are manifest in this holy name. It's non-different from Krishna. So that's all we have to do. Engage the ears in hearing, engage the hands in touching, you know, that engage the mind and the senses in Krishna's service. And gradually it will develop. So we also need the instruction. Although this is for Ashtanga Yoga, which is stepwise, you know, long process, very difficult. But we can take these instructions and we can apply them to our practice of Bhakti Yoga. And this is what Prabhupada's indicating in the purport. That is why he says, that is the way of bringing the senses under full control. That's the previous sense. In transcendental sense happiness, the senses are engaged in the service of Rishikesha, the Lord of the senses. Our supreme owner of the senses, Krishna. Serving Krishna with purified senses is called Krishna consciousness. That is the way of bringing the senses under full control. And then Prabhupada adds, what is more, that is the highest perfection of yoga practice. So we can draw from this understanding. This is for the Ashtanga yogi, very difficult process, not possible in this age, but we can learn from it. We also have to bring our mind under full control in the senses. And the way to do that, that is by engaging them in Krishna's service in whatever way we can, actually. We shouldn't be shy about that. You know, wherever we're at is wonderful. We all have different capacities depending on our stage of advancement. Wherever we're at is wonderful. I glorify you. I offer my obeisances to you for wherever you're at. And we must increase. We shouldn't be lazy, actually. That is mentioned by the sages at Naimisharanya. In this age, the people are short-lived, quarrelsome, lazy, unlucky, misguided, and their minds are always disturbed. We mustn't be lazy. Because if we're lazy, we get complacent and we won't make advancement. So wherever we're at is great. Chanting one round, doing a little service is great. Reading a little bit Bhagavad Gita, fine. We're chanting 16 rounds initiated. Serving in the temple, great. But we can always increase. Because the more we increase, the more we push material nature out of our consciousness. Because that's what's required, actually. If you're going to go back to the spiritual world, you've got to be cent%. It's no good having material desires and expecting to go back. So we're practicing now. Wherever we're at is great. I commend you for that. But we must move forward more and more to engage the senses in the service of the Lord of the senses. Bhakti uchate, that is the definition of pure devotional service, to actually do that. So we've got 4 minutes left. There's kind of write questions on the chat, but no one's writing. So that's okay, you know. My spiritual master says if there are no questions, there are 2 reasons for that. Yeah, I'll tell you the reasons, and then you can decide which category you fall into. One reason is that you've understood everything. And the other reason is you've understood nothing.
We have questions. We just haven't written them down. Jodhi has a question.
Sorry, me. Oh, Hare Krishna. Prabhuji,
Hare Krishna,
I am actually, I'm confused with the yogi and the Goswamis. What's the difference? That's one part of it. Also, do you have to be Krishna conscious? Sorry. Shall
we do that? We do the first question first, and then we do the other one. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So a yogi is supposed to become a Goswami.
All right.
So a yogi is practicing a bona fide process for spiritual advancement. But what is the goal of that spiritual? Well, one of the goals is you have to become a Goswami. You have to learn to control your senses. Otherwise, there's no possibility of spiritual advancement. So a yogi is supposed to become a Goswami.
Okay. Now,
okay?
Why are some called Goswami and some are called Swamis? What's the difference? Does that mean the Swami don't control their senses?
You notice Prabhupada used both words in the purport. Did you notice that? He said a Goswami or a Swami.
All right.
So when we use the word, when we use Swami, it's implied, it's understood, oh, you're the master of your senses. So the words are interchangeable.
Okay.
One is more descriptive. Swami, what are you the Lord of? Actually, I'm the Lord of my senses. But when we use Swami, it's understood. Oh, you must have mastered your senses. So the two words are interchangeable. Is that
Okay,
okay?
because I would prefer Goswami, sounds better. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
it
that's
does. And
that
it's more
one.
descriptive also.
Yeah. Okay. So does a yogi, does he have to follow Krishna consciousness? Because you hear people say they're yogi because they follow a yogic practice and they follow maybe a demigod or some other gods of their own kind, and they reach that platform. Does it mean only Krishna consciousness would, you mean senses are engaged in Rishikesha would be the only way to reach that highest? Sorry.
That is
I mean the transcendental level, yeah.
That is what we're studying here. You see, at the end, what does Krishna say at the very end of Bhagavad Gita? Do you know?
He said, you engage your mind and body in service, in Krishna conscious service.
No, actually, you can look the verse up. It's 1866. You see, Krishna has been describing different kinds of religion in the Bhagavad Gita. And at the end, you can look the verse up while we're sitting here, 1866. He says, you give up all that religion I've described and you just surrender to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you see, all other yogic systems are meant to lead to bhakti yoga. They're bona fide, but they're meant to lead to. And the thing about demigod worship is, well, you can study for yourself. In the verses 720 to 723, Krishna explains that those who worship the demigods, actually, they worship me, but in an improper way. So the demigod worship won't lead. Krishna says, actually, those who worship the demigods go to the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. You can look the verses up, 720 to 723. And those who worship ghosts and spirits take birth among such beings. But those who worship me will come to me. So we have to be a lover of Krishna. We have to come to that platform to surrender to Krishna. Maybe call different things in different religious systems, but that is the basic. You can't get the same platform by worshipping a demigod. They cannot give you the spiritual world. They don't have that capacity. They give you some material things which will come and will go, but they cannot release you from material nature. They do not have that ability. They're the Lord's servants to run the material nature. So yes, we have to come to the platform of loving God and engaging in his. Is that all right, Jolly?
Yeah, sure. That's really helpful. But when you were describing it all, it sounds such a journey to get there. But you did sum it up at the end, which was beautiful. Thank you. Give me a bit more leeway to think.
You see, you've got a lot of leeway. This is what I said at the end, that whatever you're doing, that's great. Yeah. But just have desire to increase. No? Yes. You know, it's not so difficult compared with the system we're studying in the 6th chapter. If you see the picture of the yogi, do you want to go through all that?
Definitely no.
Yeah. No.
Actually, we can.
But yogi is quite loosely used, isn't it? Really.
You see
the label.
The devotees, I have the back door key. Even if you're 70% pure, I'll let you in. Promise you can do it in one lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah, one lifetime.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Really, really helpful. Thank you.
Pramila Mataji, do you have a question?
Yes, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I
wanted
to know who actually worship ghosts and spirit. What does that mean? Because to me, I can't understand anybody worshiping ghosts and spirits.
Have you ever been to Thailand or Burma or places like that?
I've been to Thailand.
Have you never seen them? The little mandap by a tree. Have you never seen that?
Actually, I've seen in one of the temple, they had the head of a pig offered.
Yes. So it is worship in the mode of ignorance, actually. Some people are built like that. They want to worship something, so they worship ghosts and spirits. There's a place in the country I'm living in South Africa. There's a place called Durban. Durban. So my spiritual master comments that it is the Bhuta capital of the world. Bhutas meaning disembodied living entities. Yeah, there are lots of people who do that, who worship ghosts and spirits. Believe it or not, they do. Even in India, it goes on. Prabhupada in one purport comments, it goes on in certain places in northwest India. People worship ghost spirits. So yes, unfortunately it does. No? You know, the planet above ours, we're living in Bhuloka. The next planetary system above ours is Bhuvaloka. Did you know that?
Yes, yes.
What that planet is?
Oh, that is of the ghosts.
Yes, it's the ghosts and the Rakshasas. It's only 100 miles above the surface of the earth. So that stuff goes on.
And actually, Prabhu, in the Bhagavatam, where the hierarchy of living entities and so are, ghosts actually come up quite high. I can't remember if it's Canto 5 or which one.
You know why they're above us in the planetary system? They're above us, actually. They're better than us. Do you know why?
Yeah, and no, I'm not quite sure. I was told, but I don't remember fully.
Because they don't have they don't have this gross material body.
Yeah.
They can run rings around you. They can read you. You know, when you see these people are mediums, you know, and they say, oh, yes, you know, I'm thinking of somebody whose name begins with the letter D. They're in touch with one of these beings. They can read your mind, actually. They can run rings around you. They don't have a gross body. So that way they're higher than us, actually.
But is it not right or true that when somebody dies, say, for example, in an accident, and I was told like it's before their time, so they can become a ghost? Is that right?
Yeah. You see, because under normal circumstances, when we die, it takes some time. For most people, it takes some time. And therefore, internally, we're able to adjust to the idea. So when we actually leave, the subtle body leaves the gross body, then we're kind of okay with it because we had some time to prepare. But when the death is sudden, when the death is in a car accident or something like what we call an untimely death, if the person is not very aware spiritually, then the subtle body doesn't have the time to register. So what happens is that they're out of their gross body, but they haven't really had time to adjust to the idea. So what they try to do is they try to re-enter their body, or they stay in the vicinity of the body. And it may take considerable time for that person to adjust to the idea that they can't re-enter their body. So they get stuck in that situation. So that kind of thing can happen in an untimely death.
But does it apply to, sorry.
Pramila, is that okay?
Does it apply to suicide, that piece? Sorry, I don't want to miss it.
Yes, in a case of suicide, you see the material body, the gross body, is a gift of material nature, which, you know, we want to enjoy separate from Krishna. So Krishna arranges, therefore, that we get a vehicle for enjoying without Krishna. That is called the gross body. Commit suicide, it is like throwing Krishna's present back in his face. So what happens generally is that we exist in ghostly form for the length of time the body would have survived under normal circumstances. You don't get another body because you rejected the one you were given. So you see that. You see, I have a background in dealing with people and suicide and that kind of thing, and I'll tell you that I know cases that have got very close to not coming back, and they get the realization that what they're going into is even worse than what they've got. Why it's worse? Because the gross body, you're able to fulfill your desires for sense gratification. But when you have a subtle body, there's no gross body for doing that, so it's very frustrating. You have desires, but you can't fulfill them. So it's very frustrating. And that is why sometimes the ghosts, they bother people who are in their gross bodies, because they're trying to enjoy through other people's bodies. You get that in possession as well. Somebody actually takes over, some ghost takes over another person's body. So it's not a good situation. So if you commit suicide, generally that's what happens. You get a ghost body for the time your gross body would have existed. Is that all right, Jolly?
Yeah, that's, sorry, Pramila, sorry, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Jory. It's okay. Prabhu, but you know, I think that this ghost stage is kind of sad. I heard that Srila Prabhupada used to see the ghosts around the manor and had to tell them, go away.
Yes, because actually there's one example. Prabhupada at one time wanted to rent a house, and the house was haunted. And actually Prabhupada tells the story of how he met that ghost. And he discussed the ghost. What did you do? What happened to you? And eventually Prabhupada actually liberated from that situation by chanting the Maha Mantra. So we can do that, you know. Some people are sensitive to that. By chanting the Maha Mantra, you can actually liberate them from that terrible state.
Oh, that's, yeah, you can help them. So if we are chanting and we treat our homes like a temple, God is here, he's with us all the time in our body, the ghosts cannot really affect us, can it?
Yes.
Can they?
Well, whereas the chanting of the holy name, the ghosts cannot come there.
No, thank you, Prabhu. Very nice discourse.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Sorry, Prabhu, can I just add something that we hear about you only go when your time is right. So you're destined to have whether it's accident or not.
But there can be untimely death. There can
Is that what you say? Because I think
especially when a spirit soul is very sinful. We read in different places that, for instance, that when Dushashan touched the hair of Draupadi to drag her into the gambling arena, it shortened the duration of his life. I was just reading a purport like that the other day, where Prabhupada says that actually because no one spoke up in the gambling arena when Draupadi was dragged by Dushashan, it shortened the duration of their lives because they insulted the chaste woman, or they didn't say anything when a chaste woman was insulted. It shortened their lives. Actually, even on a short-term scale, it is said that if a wife cuts her hair without the permission of her husband, it shortens his life.
Oh. What, the husband's life or the wife's?
Yes, the husband's life.
Oh, really? Oh, my goodness. I've never heard that. But can I just ask one more bit that connects with that? Kamal Krishna Swami, Goswami wasn't he? Well, would you have thought that I thought that was destined, because he knew when he was he had an idea he's gonna die.
Yeah, actually, when a soul is very, very advanced and very spiritually pure, they usually know.
Yeah.
They usually know. And they're being called, Krishna calls them back.
That's right. Yeah, that's how I saw it anyway.
It's like when Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj left his body, Krishna Maharaj came to him. Krishna Maharaj left his body before Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj left his body. And he came to him and he told him, Prabhupada, there's some other service for you. You must come.
Wow.
Wow, yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if Prabhupada calls us when we have time to go?
Oh, wow. We got to be close to Prabhupada. Like the Swami that died recently.
My spiritual master said, that when you leave your body, if you're pure, I'll take you and I'll introduce you to Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, I heard that too. But the Swami that died, is it Charu Swami?
Yeah, that is my spiritual master.
Oh, really? Oh, Hare Krishna. Well, listen, he was very close with Prabhupada. And
my godbrother was the last person to see him before they wheeled him into the ICU and sedated him to put him on a ventilator.
Wow.
My godbrother.
Yeah.
He told my godbrother, you don't have to worry. I'm always with Krishna and Prabhupada.
Yes, he was so pure, wasn't he?
Exactly.
But there's a guy, he was looking after him and he went everywhere with him. And he tried to encourage him to go with him to Florida. And somehow he didn't turn up. And he was saying, well, that's why I think when your time is ready, you go, because he followed his heart and followed Krishna's teaching and went and he died. But what about the servant he had? He didn't go and he didn't die, so he wasn't ready to go, was he?
Yeah, it may not be his time.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, you see,
very interesting subject.
Yeah, see, you're interested, very interested in that. Was it very satisfied you, Jolene?
Sorry?
Have we satisfied you?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's very beautiful prasadam, I tell you. It's nectar.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Sorry, we took up so much time. Oh my goodness.
Hare question. Can I quickly
The
ask?
last question from Smita Mataji. We must respect Prabhuji's time as well. So
Okay,
this is the
thank
last
you. Thank
question.
you. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. No, don't be sorry.
I'm going to go back into this ghost world again.
Okay.
Last.
It's not good. You know that. Don't go into the ghost world. Actually, I find that the devotees are too much interested in this subject. You know, I find that quite a lot. And when it comes to the ghost discussions, everyone gets very excited. So, come on, now, what's your question?
How long does it take to for them to go back into a material body?
Into a gross body?
Yeah.
It will depend on the circumstances under which they entered into a ghost body. It'll depend. You see, under normal circumstances, it's very difficult. If you wind up in that situation, it is very difficult to get out of it. In most cases, it's very difficult to get out of it. So this is why, I don't know if you know, but at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna said, you know, we shouldn't fight this battle because too many people will be killed and the pinda to the departed ancestors will be stopped. Because the pinda is the thing which liberates them from the ghost. You know, so, you know, as devotees, just by our practice, automatically, you know, we can help people to get out of that situation. But it will vary depending on how that particular living entity entered into the ghostly situation. In some cases, it may be short. In some cases, it may be very long, because they're closed to the idea. You know, they get attached to that environment. They get attached to giving gross embodied living entities trouble. They get attached to playing pranks and doing these kinds of things. So you can get into that situation. It can be very difficult to get out of it. So we should always be mindful, you know, that when we chant as well, that when we're chanting, it helps those beings to actually get out of that situation. Is that all right, Smita?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. My humble obeisances to you, Prabhuji.
Mine to you too. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Krishna. I think this was a good session, but all good things must end till next Sunday. So we'll continue the discussion next Sunday. So Path Prabhuji, I think Path Prabhuji might have left for a seva. Okay, so let's all unmute and chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra to glorify Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada ki jai. Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.
See you next week.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Ending the session.